Hello guys, welcome to yet another session of Excel for Work, our virtual training program to help you work smart and be productive at the office. In today's lesson, we'll be looking at a very important concept in Excel, mastering cell referencing to create effective formulas. So if you're excited as I am, join me and let's go through this tutorial together. So let's start off in the sheet called reference. Okay. Now, imagine you are given this task to calculate total sales of these various items with their price and quantity given. What most people would do is to multiply the price times the quantity. This gives you this value. Okay. Now, a very few amount of people might consider actually hard coding the values. 32 times 356. Which also gives you the value. However, the disadvantage of hard coding is that, first and foremost, if the cell here is changed, the price is changed to 40, the value doesn't update. You realize that this value updates, but this value doesn't update, right? Also, when you use the cell reference, that's if you equate your formula, saying equal to this cell multiplied by that cell, meaning the content of this cell times this cell, you're effectively referencing these cells in your formula. Okay, this is much more dynamic, this is much more flexible, and it makes you work faster. Okay, so if I copy this down this way, okay, you realize that it computes for the subsequent ones as well. However, if I hard code this and I drag this down, I get the same value throughout because it's copying the same content throughout. Is that okay? So rule number one, never hard code when you can reference cells. Instead of putting your inputs directly in a formula, rather consider putting them in cells and referencing them. Great. So now let's try and understand why we used C18 times Z18 over here. However, in this cell, we're having C19 times Z19. The reason why this is happening is because of a concept in Excel called cell referencing. Now, by default, whenever you refer to two cells or a cell in Excel in a formula, and you copy in a certain direction, the cell references will change in the same direction. So let's take this example. Let's say I have this sequence of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, and then 9. Great. Let me bring in some rules over here. Alt HIR. Great. Okay. Now this is what I'm saying. In Excel by default, if I do equal to and I select another cell, what I'm effectively saying is to get the value or to get the result that's supposed to be in this cell, that's in F13, refer to F8. Whatever is in F8 is what's supposed to be here. So I'm referencing cell F8, right? Good. So I get 2, which is over here. Now, if I have 2 hard-coded over here like this, okay, and I copy this 2, I move one step to the right and paste it, you realize that I still get the same 2, which is the content of this cell, right? However, if I'm referencing a cell like this, F8, and I copy this, and I move one step to the right and I paste, I don't get 2, but I get 3, okay? Because by default, in Excel, when you're referencing a cell in a formula, I've effectively created a formula, okay? And in that formula, I'm referencing a cell. But if I copy that formula and I move one step to the right and I paste it, the reference in that formula is going to also move one step in the same direction. So I was here, right? I move one step to the right and now I'm here. Is that okay? So that is cell referencing. And in Excel, this is the default behavior. So we call this relative cell reference. The default behavior is relative cell reference. Let me take this off. Relative cell reference. Where you have this, you copy to the right, now you have that. If I copy this and I move one step down, what do you think I'm going to get? Yes, 5. Right? So I have 5 over here because this was the reference to F8. And then as I move down one step, it moves to what? F9. So by default, this is the behavior in Excel. right? Now I want you to pay something or pay close attention to the components of a cell. We know that a cell is made up of two components. What? It's made up of the column, right? And then it's made up of what? The row, right? So if you take a cell like F8, for example, right? If you take the cell F8, the column is F, and then the row is what? 8. Is that okay? Now, this is the reference I'm talking about, F8. Now, when I copied it to the right one step, it changed to what? G8, right? So from F8, we now have what? G8. Is that okay? So you notice that as I copy to the right, so if I copy this and I paste this to the right, I get 0, right? So this was referencing this, move one step to the right, referencing this, it becomes what? H8. So what do you notice over here? There's a pattern developing. What do you notice? You notice that as I copy to the right, the column keeps changing from F to G to what? To H. But then the row has remained the same throughout. Do you see that? So column is changing, but row remains the same. Is that okay? Yes. So that means what is causing this formula to change or to update into the new values is the column changing. Is that okay? Now let's take the same thing for when we copy downwards. So this is copying to the right, and this is copying down. Okay, so I'm going to copy these two headers, and I'm going to bring them here. Is that okay? So we had this F8, so I'm going to copy this too. So F8, right? And when I copy one step down, it becomes what? F9. Do you see that? So yes, F, and then it became 9. Now this reference, F9, by default, if I copy this and I paste it one step down, I get 8, which is what? F10. So as I copy down, what do you realize? You realize that as I copy down, I'm getting the same column throughout, right? But the row number keeps what? Keeps changing. So as you copy down, the row number changes, but then the column remains the same. And as you copy right, the row number will remain the same. Okay, so I'm copying from here to here to here. The row number remains the same, but then the column what? Changes. So that's how relative referencing is. In the direction you copy, the reference is also going to move in the same direction. Okay. Now, it's not all instances that we want that behavior. So in our example we just did here, when we copied this down, we were okay with our references changing as well, right? So you notice that we had C28 times D28. When this came down, it came to what? C29, and this came to D29. So as I copy my formula down, these references also move down and select the subsequent respective cells, right? And that is the behavior we want. So relative referencing helped us to do this quickly. Okay, so let's look at this example and let's see how this is different. So over here, we have the items and we have the old prices. Okay, and so your supplier has hinted of a price adjustment, and as such, you need to increase your prices by 10% to stay profitable. Okay, so we have our old prices and we need to calculate the new price. So the new price is going to be the old price by an increase of the price, then percentage increase. So the first thing you need to do is always get your formula right. So it's going to be equal to our old price multiplied by, into bracket 1, that's the old price, plus the increase in the percentage rate, right? Like I said, it's better to reference your cells than to type the formulas or to type the components of the formula hard-coded inside. So if I do this, I get the new price, and then the good thing about this is if I change this to 20%, right, my formula updates as well. Great. Now we have referenced ourselves in our formula. Now if you drag this down, okay, you realize that the price didn't change for this or any of them as well, right? And this is the reason why, because we are using relative reference. So in our initial formula, this is referencing that. Okay, so if I copy this down, by default, because the formula is being copied down, the references will also move down as well. So this moves down here, right? And this also moves down here. So that's why in the second formula, we have this multiplied by that. This is the normal behavior in Excel, the relative reference. But I realize that this doesn't help us like it helped us in the first example. Okay, so we need to find a way to make Excel understand that we don't want this reference to move down as we move down. Is that okay? We are okay with the blue one moving down, but the red one, we don't want it to move down. But I want you to take note of something before we go up again. So here, the formula was C46, and then multiplied by open bracket 1 plus F44, right? Now this is 46, this is 44. Now you notice that this one counts with 47, this one counts with 45. Is that okay? But then the columns remain the same, so C and F. Okay. Now, whenever you have an issue with a component of a cell giving you the wrong cell reference you want because of relative reference, you need to identify which component of the formula or the cell is changing. So for this cell, we are having a wrong reference, and the component that is changing is the number. So it's changing from 44 in this cell, 44 to 45. Is that okay? Now that is how we resolve the problem. Once we identify the problem, we know how to resolve it. So let's come back to our layout over here. Is that okay? So we looked at the references over here, and we spoke about how when you copy to the right, the columns change, but the row remains the same. And when you copy down, the column remains the same, but the rows keep changing. Is that okay? So let me clear this. And let's do this again. So if I do equal to this, is that okay? So F8, if I drag this to the right, coming here to copy to the right like this, I get 3. Okay, so the column has changed to G, but the row has remained the same as 8. Now this behavior might not always be wanted. Sometimes you want to keep referring to the same cell as you copy to the right. Okay, so to let Excel know that you don't want this to change, what you do is you bring a $sign in front of the component of the cell you do not want to change. So in this instance, we don't want the F to change because that's what's changing. So put the $sign here in the original formula like this. Now if I drag this to the right, you notice that what? It refers to the same cell. If I drag this to the right, it refers to the same cell. You see that? What I'm doing is locking the component of the cell that is changing. So this has locked the $sign on the column F. So as I drag this to the right, because this was what was changing, it's now going to keep F constant. So if I copy this down, you realize I get F8, F8, F8 as I copy it to the right. I get F8, F8. Okay, so by putting the $sign in front of what is changing, I'm effectively referencing that same cell. Is that okay? Now, if I copy this down, even though it's log, you realize that I'm still having different answers and I'm not getting the 2. Why? Because when you copy down, the component of the cell that is changing is the row, changing from 8, 9, and 10. The F remains constant. So putting a $sign in front of it doesn't change or make any difference. Is that okay? So to lock the row, what you need to do as you copy down is to put a $sign rather in front of the component that's changing. In this case, the 8. Is that okay? So when I hit enter and I copy this down, now you realize that I get what? F8 throughout. Is that okay? Yes. For some people, they would prefer to log this absolutely. To unlock a cell absolutely means you put the $sign in front of the column and the row like this. So if you do this, it also works. So this is logged absolutely. If I copy it down, realize that I get the same reference as I copy this formula down. Okay, but then locking what is actually changing, right, also resolves the problem. So both of them works. So you need to understand how to lock cells. So if copying this down, I get F8 throughout. Great. So let's come and apply this learning over here. So this is the original formula. Okay, C46 multiplied by open bracket 1 plus that. Okay, now I do not want this to change to this and then change to this as it moves down. So what I need to do is identify the component of the cell that's changing. So this is F44, it becomes F45. So I come here and I'm going to put a dollar sign here, because that's the component of the cell that's changing. I can block the column as well, the F, but that's redundant because the F is not changing anyway. So that way, then holding the shift key and the direction key to the bottom, Control D to copy down. So you realize that my formula keeps referencing the right cell throughout. Great. Okay, let's try this as well. So here we have some quantity and then we have some unit cost. You're supposed to write a formula that calculates the various total quantity in these cells. Okay, so the first thing to do is to get your formula right. So it's going to be equal to the price multiplied by the total cost. Okay, so this price multiplied by that. And the next thing to do is to ask yourself, what direction am I going to copy in this formula? I'm going to be copying my formula in two directions. The first direction is down, and the second direction is to the right. Okay, so I'll copy this formula first down, and I'll copy it to the right. So with that in mind, I need to take each cell reference and then question myself how they'll behave in both directions. So the first cell reference, C62. If I copy this formula down, I expect this reference by default to move down as well. So it's going to change from C62 to C63. And is that where the unit cost for this cell would be, in C63? Yes. If that's the case, then I am okay with the cell behaving that way, and therefore I do not lock it. Okay, so that's with copying it down. Now to the right. If I'm copying this cell to the right, or this formula to the right, I expect this reference C62 to move to the right as well. So from C62 to D62. So if I'm in E, it's going to reference D62. Is that what I want? Is that a behavior I expect? No. I want it to remain here in column C. So what do? Then I lock the component that's changing from C62 to D62. So the component is the column, so dollar sign here. Right? So I'm done with copying down and copying to the right for the first cell. Let's take the second cell. If I copy this reference down, right, I expect the red reference to move down with me. So it's going to change from D61 to D62 and D63 onwards. Now that's not the behavior I want. I want it to remain here in D62. So I'm going to put a dollar sign in front of 61 so that it doesn't change from 61 to 62 as I copy down. Now to copying it to the right. When I copy this formula to the right, okay, what I expect is that this reference, okay, will also move to the right. So it's going to move from D61 to E61 to F61. Okay. Now that behavior is normal and that's the behavior I want. So then I do not lock the column. Okay. So with that done, I hit enter. I come here. I'm going to copy this down like that, like I said, and copy this to the right. I realize that my references are correctly done. Is okay? Good. So that is how you use cell referencing. Okay, now let's come to this practice. Practice 1. So here we have a menu, we have price, we have quantity. We're supposed to calculate sales or amounts. Okay, we're supposed to calculate sales amount. So this is going to be equal to the price for the first item multiplied by its quantity. Okay, now because we're copying this formula down, we need to ask ourselves how these cells will behave in that direction. So the blue cell is going to come down to this, and then the red cell will come down here. Now that's the behavior we want, so we're okay with that. We hit enter, and then we can copy this down that way. Okay, so everything checks out. Good. Now, tax on sales. Now, the tax on sales is the sales amount multiplied by the tax rate over here. Okay, so it's going to be equal to sales amount multiplied by our tax rate. Okay. Now, again, you need to ask yourself, in what direction is this formula being copied? It's being copied down. The blue cell is going to select the next cell at the bottom, and so on and so forth. The red cell is also going to select the next cell as well. So just for you to appreciate this, I'm going to copy this one step down. Realize that this came one step down. This also came one step down. Okay, so we need to identify how to resolve this problem. It's currently reading G77, but in the original formula, where you always do the log-in, is G76. So the next question you ask yourself is, what changed in this formula? So it's row. So I put a dollar sign here, like this, and then I log that effectively. I can now drag this down, and then I have my cell referencing the right values. So total cost, okay, which is going to be equal to this plus that, and I can copy this down as well. Just give me this. Another effective way to do this quickly is to actually highlight these values in addition to where you want to do the totals. So let me take off my merge and center here. So I'm going to take this off. So merge and center, where are you? Here you are. So merge cells, good. Then I'm going to highlight all these values. So like that. Okay, then I'm going to use a shortcut for auto sum, which is alt equal to, and then I effectively calculate these values quickly. Right? Great. Okay, now let's look at this as well, this example. So over here, you have an example where a group of friends bought some dollars from Zero Bank at an agreed rate of 7.4 Ghana cedi for $1. However, they monitor the exchange rates to see what they would get if they sold those dollars to the market instead of Zero Bank at the agreed rate. Now, these are the values, and these are the changes in the rates between the rate with Zero Bank, which is 5.74, and the going rate or the market rate. So on Monday, the going rate was 30 pesos less than the agreed rate. On Tuesday, it was 20 pesos less. Wednesday was the same, that's 0. And then Thursday, 0.45. Friday was 7.5. So the first formula, which I have generously done for you, is going to be equal to the dollar rate multiplied by your agreed rate plus the changing rate. That's going to show you how much they're going to get if they decide to change this in the market instead of with Zero Bank. So now, how do we log this effectively so we can copy this to the right and copy it down? Two directions. So we're copying this in two directions. We need to take each term and understand how they will behave. So first, the blue term. So if I copy this to the right, I'm going to have this changing from C104 to D104. I don't want that, so I'm going to put a dollar sign in front of the C. Okay. Now if I copy this down, it's going to move from C104 to C105 to C106, which is correct. So I leave it as it is. I don't log the rule. Then we take the red term, which is this. Is that okay? If I copy this formula to the right, this is going to move to the right as well. So it's going to move from C99 to D99 to E99. That is not a behavior I want. So I take note that it's changing from C99 to D99 to E99, which is what the column or the alphabet. So I need to log that to prevent it from moving. That's copying to the right. Now, when you copy this down, it's going to change from C99 to C100 to C101 to C102. So realize that the number will also change as I copy down. So I need to log the number as well. So this is the instance where you normally have to log absolutely, where your formula is moving in two directions, right? And therefore, you need to log a cell absolutely, whether it moves to the right or move down. It needs to stay the same. Okay, the last one is cell D102. If I copy this to the right, it moves from here to here, which is E102 to F102. That's not a behavior That's actually a behavior I want. So that means I leave the column to change. So it changes from D102 to E102 to F102. So that's okay, that's good. But when I copy this down, it's going to move from D102 to D103 to D104. So I need to log what the number. Good. But that's not the behavior I want. So I copy this to the right. I copy this down. Is that okay? So this is a formula again. So I log column for this, I log the cell for this, and I log the row for that. Great. Okay, so that is about it for cell referencing. Okay, so very simple. If you understand it, it can be a bit tricky when you start, but once you understand it, you can really go a long way with it. But then if you have 365, there's good news. You don't really need to worry yourself so much about cell referencing when you have Excel or Microsoft 365. So I'm going to duplicate the sheets. So I'm going to left click. When you left click, you see a sheet of paper on the mouse. When you left click on the name reference, I'm going to press the control key whilst I'm left clicking. So still with the left click on, hold control, and I move one step to the right, and then I leave this. And I have another sheet. So referencing, I'm going to rename this referencing 365. The newer versions of Excel have this feature. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take off all the formulas or the calculations. So delete this guy. Okay, so I'm going to show you how you can do this without referencing with the newer versions of Excel. Okay, so in the new versions of Excel, you write your formulas at an array level or a range level instead of at a cell level. So what I mean is, so instead of doing price, which is this price of the first item multiplied by the quantity, what you do is to select all the prices, multiply it by all the quantity. Okay, so this is a dynamic array in Excel. So when you do this, you just press enter, and then you realize that everything is calculated for you. Is that okay? So everything is calculated over here. The formula resides here. Okay, but then it's going to spill the result in the subsequent cell. So you realize there's a blue highlighter around this, indicating that this is a dynamic array. If there's something in the way, you're going to get a new error called the spill error. You need to delete whatever is in the way. So I'm going to delete this, and then it spills. Is that okay? You cannot delete the formula from any other part of the cell apart from where the formula mainly resides. Great. Okay, so let's see how this makes work easier for us. So for the new price, it's going to be equal to, I select the entire old price, multiply by open brackets, 1 plus our new price. Now, because these formulas are written at a range level and not cell by cell, and we're going to be copying down, we don't need to block this. Enter, and then you notice that everything calculates, right? So this effectively calculates everything for us without having to log. Okay, so how do you think this is going to be done? Right, it's going to be equal to unit cost multiplied by our quantity. As simple as that. Enter, and then everything is what? It's done. Right? Great. So this is going to be, so let's calculate sales. Sales is going to be price, like we did for the other one, multiplied by quantity. And then tax is also going to be equal to sale amount. Right? Now when I reference a dynamic array, I get this new cell reference, which is the first cell, the dynamic array, and the hash, meaning that the range you reference is a dynamic array. Okay, because the dynamic array doesn't really have an end. It can continue scaling, and therefore it's just the first cell and the hash multiplied by that. Enter, and then you have this. So total, like we did for the other one, you can do this alt equal to, and we have this as well. Is that okay? Great. Now let's calculate for our cedis after we convert our dollars. So equal to all your dollars plus open brackets your exchange rates plus your change in rate. Okay, so your dollars, no, multiply, not plus, sorry. So multiplied by your dollar rate agreed with Zero Bank, and then the change in rate with the going rate. So when I hit enter, notice I calculate this effectively and get everything I'm supposed to get. Okay, so that's with dynamic arrays. Okay, it limits the use of cell referencing. Cell referencing can still be used in dynamic arrays, right? But then it's not as prevalent and it's not as widespread as it is without dynamic arrays. Okay, great. Now let's move on to another important concept in referencing cells or in calculations. Okay, now like we mentioned earlier, every cell is named after a column and a row by default. So this cell E113 is from column E and row 3. That bets the cell E113. So in this sheet, this cell is known as E113. When you go to another sheet, E113 is an entirely different sheet or entirely different cell. Okay, what you can do is you can name a cell so that wherever you go within your workbook, that cell is known as that particular name throughout the workbook. So let's take for instance this cell that contains our rate 15%. That's C118. Okay, we can name this cell so that every sheet in this workbook will know that this cell is going by that particular name. Okay, so we're going to give this cell the name com.rate, right? And then wherever we are, we can call this cell, and then the value within the cell will come. So standing in the cell, you come to your name box over here, you click in it and you type the name. So com.rate, so com.rate, and you press enter. Okay, names we give in the name box do not take spaces, so that's why we have com.rate. What this means is that if I do equal to com.rate, right, once it's in blue I tab, realize that the cell is referenced, and I hit enter, I get the value in the cell. I can use this anywhere in my workbook. So if I come to branch C here, I do equal to these values. So this value multiplied by com.rate, tab, enter. So this is giving me 15% of this value. Is that okay? Yes, I can use it anywhere in my workbook. Okay, so with this named, you can now use this in your formula. So let's say I want to calculate commission, which is the commission rate times sales. So equal to, first I need to calculate sales. So in a bracket, I have this multiplied by that. Okay, then multiply this by my rate. So com.rate tab. Now because I have named this cell, okay, this name is an absolute name. Okay, it's an absolute reference. So if I do enter, I don't need to log this. If I drag this down, everybody knows that com.rate is this exact same cell. So it doesn't change. It keeps the same reference. You see that? Great. Now, I can also name a range. So for instance, I can name these cells as quantity and then use it in my formula to calculate average quantity. So this is what I mean. So if I select this, I come here, I type quantity, right? If I do equal to average, I can call out quantity and realize our quantity is what selected. Just like how we could select table columns using the table structured referencing. So quantity, and I press enter, and I have that. Right, good. So that is another way you can write effective formulas by naming cells or ranges in Excel. Okay, I'm also going to name selling price and commission. There's another way to name them. You can select them with their names. So selling price and commission. So for quantity, we didn't select the name, we just selected the quantity, the values, then we named it over here as quantity in the name box. But the other method, you can select their names with their values, come to formulas, and they say create a name from selection. The shortcut is Ctrl+Shift+3. So I click that, and it says create a name from selection. Create names from values in the top row. So I'm going to use the values in the top row to create a name for this range. I click OK, and just like that, I now have selling price. So if I do equal to selling, so you see what I have selling price, I press tab, and it's selected. You get it? If I do equal to commission, I have commission tab, and this is selected. So I can now calculate my average selling price like that, as simple as it gets. Enter, and I can calculate sum of commission. I can close my brackets and enter, and then we are done. Right? Great. So that is how you can use name ranges in your formulas to make you work quick and smart at the office. Okay, now before I go, I'm going to show you one last trick to effectively or quickly do calculations in Excel. Okay, so let's take this instance where you have a template. Okay, so you have branch A, right, and you have the products, and then you have your sales. The same template, same layout for branch B, same layout for branch C. And then in another sheet, you want to do some computation on the values across these sheets. Okay, now the safest way to do this, right, is what we always do. So equal to sum. Okay, so sum. Okay, you come to branch A, you select the value. You come to branch B, hold Control, come to branch B. So branch A, you select the value, you bring comma. Come to branch B, select the value, comma. Come to branch C, select the value. Then you close brackets and enter. Right? Now, this is a long process because you have several sheets. It's going to take a long time to get this done. But this is, frankly, the safe way to get it done. However, you can also quickly do this with 3D referencing. Okay, when you reference across sheets without going through each of them one by one. So what I mean is if I go equal to sum and I come to branch A, I do not select the value for branch A. All I do is I hold shift because branch A is the first sheet, and I come all the way to the last sheet, which is branch C. Now while holding shift, you see I have branch A to branch C. Then you can leave your shift now and select the first value. So it's going to be equal to sum branch A to branch C, C14. Now you close the bracket and enter. Right. So with that, we realize we have the same value as we had over here using selecting the cells one by one. Right. If I copy this down, I'm going to get the same values as well. The issue with this, however, is there are instances when anything could happen. So let's say I have branch B as a sheet in between branch A and branch C. Okay, if this sheet is moved out to another location, so let's say I left click on this and I move it here. Now look at my formula. See that this still gives me the right answer, but this has changed because this is referencing the first sheet and all the way to the last sheet and anything in between. So branch A, branch C, and then anything in between is referenced as well. So if some of the sheets are removed out, you realize that the formula updates and gives you wrong values, but this gives you the right values. If another sheet that does not correspond to what you've done is put in between branch A and branch C, so let me see if I drag this and put it here, come here, you see that some of the values over here have changed as well. Do you see? But then this remains intact. So even though this is a faster way to get this done, right, it's advisable that you always stick to the safe one, which is this. And you can use this just as a cross-check to make sure what you've done here is correct. Okay, let's do this again. Let's calculate average. So average, we're going to each sheet, select this, bring a comma, come to branch B, select that, comma, branch C, select this, and we close bracket, enter. Okay, so these are our values. Okay, and then let's use the 3D reference to cross-check to see if this is correct. So equal to average. Come to the first sheet. I hold shift. So you don't select anything in the first sheet. You hold shift and you come to the last sheet in your selection and you select this first value. You can leave shift, close the brackets now, and press enter. Okay, I can copy this down. And then it checks out the values are the same. Okay, so use this carefully, use this very well. I advise you use it to cross-check your multiple selections so that you make sure everything is right. But this on its own is very volatile, it can easily break. Okay, so this brings us to the very end of our session on cell referencing. In this workbook, I have left 2 exercises for you. So exercise number 1, redistribution. Okay, so the goal here is, as a fund manager, you have these fund balances and you're supposed to distribute them to these departments based on these percentages. However, the board has required that you always retain a certain percentage of the fund balance before you distribute the rest. So you don't distribute 47,100 to this department. You distribute the remainder of this amount after taking out 20%. So that means you're distributing only 80% to this department. Remember, no hard coding. So you don't hard code 80%, but then you find a dynamic formula that will give you 80%. The next formula or the next exercise is this budget template. Okay, so here at Finex, we always encourage people to master how to create this budget template with cell reference. The task here is you've been given the values for January, for revenue, cost of goods sold, and expenses, right? And then each quarter has its growth rate. Now what you're supposed to do is to grow previous year's values by the quarter's rate. So for February, it's going to be an increase in January's figure by 1%, meaning it's going to be equal to this multiplied by open bracket 1 plus this rate. So okay, then you're going to do the same for March, and then you're going to get the so multiplied over here like that, right? And I'm going to get the first quarter. First quarter is going to be a sum of these 3 values for the first quarter. April is going to be an increase on March by the quarter's rate, which is 3%, and so on and so forth. So you calculate everything for the totals, and then you get the profit at the end over here. Okay, so give it a try and let's see how many minutes it's going to take you to get this done. If you're having an issue or you're struggling, just come over here and click on the YouTube. Okay, skip verification. Okay, this will take you to a YouTube video on how to get this done with Bernard. A video done by Bernard on how you can get this done in 7 minutes. It's okay. So I hope you found this useful. I hope you found this productive. Add this learning to your list of Excel tricks and see you in our next subsequent session. Thank you and goodbye.
If this video was helpful and you would like to receive more of these videos directly on your WhatsApp, you can send ad to this WhatsApp number. We'll add you to our broadcast list so you receive our videos directly. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Finance Skills Hub. All our old videos are here. Please subscribe for notification of new videos or connect with us on any of these social media handles. Thank you so much for watching.